Hi everyone, the following is a video tutorial for how to create your very own jack-o'-lantern using Onshape. And so this is something that we've done before using different 3D modeling softwares, but I wanted to make a video specifically highlighting this process using our new software for this year, which is Onshape. And so pretty straightforward process. You can see my history here on the left-hand side. I haven't used too many different features to create this model, but it still looks pretty cool. So we're going to start off with creating a sketch, and that sketch is going to be half of the profile. Like if you were to flatten this pumpkin, like from a front view perspective, you would see the silhouette of what you would consider a pumpkin shape. So we're going to basically cut that in half and then revolve it around that center line down the middle. And so that's what's going to create our 3D model, the solid itself. From there, I'll create a plane out in front of that model, which I can use to create my facial details like eyes, nose, mouth, whatever you want to include. And it doesn't have to be a face. You could use text or anything else that you want. This is completely up to you. And on that plane, I'll make that sketch, and then I will extrude and cut that into the sketch. And then that actually happens a little bit further down the list. So my plane is up here. I was kind of getting ahead of myself when I was creating that. You can actually click and drag and reorder these things, and it might tell the story a little bit better. So technically, right after the revolve, I'm going to do a shell. And so I'll go through all the specifics and the numbers and the values for this, but you basically shell out the inside of the model. And then from there, I have that plane, which I draw my sketch on. One of the things that I utilized here was the mirror feature. So that way it'd be nice and symmetrical. So again, you really only have to do one half of the sketch and then mirror it over. And then from there, I extrude cut that into the model, or they call it remove. If you're an inventor person, it was extrude cut. And then lastly, we just need to poke a hole in the bottom. So if I rotate to the bottom half of the model here, you can see I do have a nice hole, and that was just a simple sketch, made a circle, and then extruded and removed that from the model. So again, if I kind of zoom in and rotate around here, you can see that the entire inside of that model is hollowed out. And the reason we do that is, yeah, of course, most jack-o'-lanterns, that's what you do, you hollow it out. But we're going to then utilize like a tea light. So if you don't have a tea light at home, like in your junk drawer or something, they sell them at the dollar store for about like a 2-pack for $1. And it's just a little LED light with a small disc battery in there that you can use to set inside of the jack-o'-lantern and illuminate it. So I actually have my 3D printer going on in the background right now, and I'm printing out this particular model. So excuse me if there's some background noise with that, but I wanted to test the fit of the hole and the dimensions that I'm about to share with you. So for some reason, when I was making this model yesterday, I was trying to model it true to size. So like the height of the model is going to be 1.5 inches tall and roughly about 1.9, let's say, inches wide in circumference. When I did that and I tried to shell out the inside of the model, no matter what value I used for the shell, it kept saying that it didn't produce a meaningful result, which means it just wasn't working. So I thought, what could I do? What could I try to potentially fool the program into actually making this shell command work? And so something that I've done in the past is just for whatever reason, the model itself is too small to actually work through figuring out this shell command. So I suggest, and what I've done is I've edited all my dimensions on this model to be at a scale of 5:1. So essentially, we're going to make this model 5 times bigger than we would actually print it at the end of the day. And not everybody has to print their model. If you'd like to have it printed, you can certainly send that over to me. That's something that we're going to do for our engineering club students. They're going to be working on this over the next week or so. But for anybody who might be in my intro to engineering class, if you would like to have your jack-o'-lantern printed out, please communicate that to me, and I can get those done as soon as possible. It's probably not going to end up being before Halloween this year, but certainly something I can get to you after the fact, and you could save for your own personal use for the years to come. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of restart and create a new file and start this thing all over from scratch again. So in order to do that, I'm going to click on Onshape. And I'm actually just going to start a second tab. That way I can go back and forth and kind of reference some of the dimensions that I have already laid out. And this is my landing page. Yours should look somewhat similar to this. And to get started, you're going to click on Create and say Document. So it's different from what we're used to in Inventor. If you're a new 3D model user, you're probably not going to understand some of the things that I'm mentioning from Inventor. But traditionally, we would say create a part file, right? And in here, everything's all housed in a document. So it's a bit of a different workflow, but I actually am starting to like it more and more each day. So I'm just going to go ahead and call this Jack-O-Lantern. And I'm just going to add record to this since I already have Jack-O-Lantern. That was the file I just shared with you. So I'm just going to call it record because that's part of what I'm doing today is recording this video. So I'm going to say OK. And it'll take a moment to load the Design Studio, the workspace. All right, and so now I'm here. So the first step, as I mentioned, as we were looking at this completed model, was to start a sketch. And if I double click the sketch here, this is what we're kind of going for. These are the 5:1 like scaled up dimensions. So that's 7.5 inches tall and then 3.125 wide for the base here. The model itself can then go beyond that, and that's why my model ended up being like, after I scaled it back down, it was like 1.9 inches. It was kind of a fuzzy number, but that's because I used a spline on the outside here to create this natural looking curve for the pumpkin itself. I did add a little stem to the top here. Traditionally in the past, I've done that separately after the fact with two different sketches and lofting it together. That ends up using a completely different feature in the program. But I thought just for today and for this tutorial, it'd be a little simpler if we just included it from the beginning with the revolve command. So that's my sketch. I'm going to go over to my clean workspace here and select Start Sketch. And then select any one of these planes. I'm going to go ahead and select the front one. And then I'm just going to click on the front of the view cube so it kind of orients me to a flat down view. And then from here, what I'll do is grab my line tool and I'm going to drag out a line to the side, hit escape on my keyboard, grab the line tool again, start on the origin and drag up from there. And then I'll go back and add dimensions to those two lines. So I would like this one to be 3.125. And then for this one, again, we're going to go for 7.5 inches tall. I can then hit the front of the view cube to kind of zoom out so it shows me those dimensions that I've laid down. And then next, what I would like to do is lay down that curve, the arc of the pumpkin shape itself. And so I'm going to use another drawing tool called Spline. And what Spline allows you to do is to click in multiple locations as you kind of make your way around the model here. And you can go back and change those points. So I'll show that here in a second in case you don't like your immediate result. But essentially, the more nodes you have, the more control you'll have over where those lines end up and how that curve looks. So I've finished placing my last line, and it gives me an option to continue drawing. I'm going to, again, just hit escape on my keyboard to kind of finish the drawing aspect. Now, from here, I can grab any one of these points and actually get rid of my spline tool. All right, I started drawing again. Control Z to get rid of that. And then I can now click and drag on these points and edit the curve. You can make it look real goofy if that's what you're going for. Or if you want, again, wanting to create something that's very traditional looking, then you can kind of soften the edges and move these pieces around so that it creates a realistic look. I kind of like how the top of my model dips down a little bit because normally that's what you would find like on a pumpkin is it kind of dips down and then you have your stem. So I'm pretty happy with the shape of this one. Again, you can do whatever you want with that. The last thing we'll do to this sketch is add the stem part to the top of it. And so to do that, if I go back to my original model, I just added a couple of lines up and around and then close this off. And then I'll show you how to use this trim feature. So I'll do the same thing here again, grab my line tool, click on the top of the 7.5 point line, and I just went up another inch. So I'll just drag that up to about an inch. And it doesn't matter exactly where that number ends up. This is kind of free form for the most part. And then I'm just going to take a line out to the right here to create another aspect of the stem. And then from here, what I'll do is actually cut down into the model. And then I can stop there. I can hit the escape key on my keyboard And so the trim feature, I love using the trim feature. This will allow you to remove any intersecting lines that you might have within a sketch. And so you can see just by hovering over it, it kind of highlights what it was going to remove in orange. So if I click to remove the little extra extension piece and the extra part of the spline that I don't need anymore, that kind of got rid of those crossing over lines. And so I should now be able to finish my sketch and move on to revolve. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll hit the green check mark to solidify the sketch. If I kind of go to the corner on the view cube, you can see I'm ready to move on to the next step, which is creating the revolve. The revolve command is right here in the ribbon. And the first thing I have to do is to figure out what's the revolve axis going to be. And so I'm going to select that middle line, but the first option here is actually select the face and the sketch regions to revolve. So I'll just click inside of there, and then it says, what do you want the revolve axis to be? So I want that to be my middle line right down the middle. So I actually had to click on that and then click that line down the middle. So let me just do that again because it was a little weird this time around. So I want to revolve. I want to select here to select the sketch, and then click here in my revolve menu so that this option is highlighted, and then select that middle line, and it should then create the solid for you. So I'll hit the green check mark, and if I just want to kind of rotate around my space here, make sure this looks pretty realistic. Kind of looks like an apple, but it is going to end up being a nice jack-o'-lantern. Okay, so if I go back to my finished example, we did the sketch, check. We did the revolve, check. The next feature is going to be shell. And so again, this was the one that kind of gave me some issues when I modeled the part at its like true size or its finished size. So we're going to model this at 0.5, and then that way when we scale it down, the shell thickness will be about 0.1. Which is just a good number to be at. We don't want to use a bunch of extra material if we don't have to. Anytime you're 3D printing, it's good to try to save and reduce as much as possible. So the next step is shell. So when I click on shell, it asks me, what are the faces you want to remove? I don't necessarily want to remove a face. I've done that in the past with Inventor. It would hollow the part and remove the face all at the same time. I wasn't able to get that to work in Onshape at the same time. So that's why in my other finished model, you saw that I actually made my own hole on the bottom. So for now, I'm just going to make sure I set my shell thickness to 0.5 and then just hit the check mark here to hollow out the part. And you might not see anything happen necessarily, or actually it said to select parts to hollow. So now select that on my screen. It's going to hollow it out. It's going to make it 0.5 inches thick on the inside. And so again, you don't really see that yet because we don't have any cuts into the model to really show that. So we kind of just have to take it on faith that that's actually worked out for us until we get to the next step. So I've shelled out the inside of the part, and you can actually right click. There's a way to create a section view using some of the planes here. So if I right click on my original sketch plane, the front plane, and then select section view, it'll actually cut that model in half. And so you can see that we have effectively created a shell inside that part. So everything's looking good so far. The next step is to create a plane. Again, this plane needs to be kind of out in front of the model. So this is the plane that I created, and you can see it's just outside of the model itself. This is where we're going to get to create our face details. So in order to create a plane, there are some options over here that you want to do the drop-down menu to get to and select plane. And then once this menu comes up, it's going to ask you, okay, what plane do you want to reference and how do you want to create a new one? So there's only a few options. The option we're going to go for is offset, and that's usually the default. So I'm going to leave it as that. And then you can select the front plane, the original one that you made the sketch on, and you're going to have a new plane on your screen. And so you can move that in two ways. You can type in a specific value. So if I wanted to move it 12 inches away, I could do that. Likewise, I could also, you can see it just moved there. I can also just click and drag on this arrow. And it doesn't matter how far out in front of the model it is, but you do want to make sure it is in front of it. That way you're not going to shortchange any of the features you create when you actually go and cut it and put it through the part. So I'm about 5.5 inches out in front. As long as there's space between that and the model, we're good to go. I'm going to hit the check mark to solidify that plane. Just a FYI, you can select the plane then and move it up and down, like the overall dimensions of the plane itself, if you want to call them that. And it doesn't really matter, but if you're somebody that just kind of likes to see it a little bigger and it's not like small and in the way, you can certainly click on it, grab the corners, and make it as big as you want. So from here, again, I'm going to start another sketch. I'm going to select plane one, and then I'm going to select the front of the view cube, so I'm kind of looking at it straight on. And from here, I just need to create my face details. And the one thing I need to add is a mirror line, because I want my jack-o'-lantern to be nice and symmetrical. And so I just grabbed a line here, and I drew that off the origin point down in the center and just brought it up above the model. It doesn't matter how tall it is, as long as it's nice and centered. That's the most important aspect of this. And now I'm just going to add some facial details. So I kind of like this top line to be on an angle here, and then I'll hit escape, grab one of my arc tools, my arc sketching tools. I'm going to go with the 3-point arc. That allows me to click on the right side, then the left, and then figure out how big do I want to make that arc. And so I kind of like making my eyes like this on jack-o'-lanterns. I feel like they look a little sinister, right? And then I'm going to add just a couple more features. Something I didn't add on my last pumpkin was a nose, and I feel like it was missing that. So I'm going to make a little triangle opening for a nose. And then I'll add some more lines to create my face. And you can make your face however you want, right? But I kind of like a jaggedy tooth look, up, down, all around. Finish this out. You can go straight across if you don't want them to have bottom teeth, or however your jack-o'-lantern gets envisioned. Again, that's the fun about making some of this stuff, is you get to have some freedom with it. Now I've created my sketch on one half of that mirror line. And so I actually really like the mirror feature in Onshape compared to Inventor. In Inventor, you'd have to like select everything, and then there was a box to preview it. But what I like about this one is it happens in real time. So the first thing it says is, once I've selected mirror, it says select the mirror line. Okay, great. That's the line right down the middle. And now select the entities to be mirrored. And there's two ways you can do that. You can go one by one and click those lines. And this is the part I like, where it automatically shows up on the other side. So I can do that for the nose. Or maybe you have a lot of line work and you don't want to spend time selecting each one. You can click and drag a box, and anything that ends up inside the box gets selected and gets mirrored over to the other side. So I think that looks pretty awesome. I'm going to finish my sketch now. Those are all the details that I would like to add. And the next step is going to be extrude and to remove that from our main model, the pumpkin. So I'm just going to start up the extrude command and then go around my sketch and select all of the features from both sides of that mirror line. And then I'm going to select remove here. And so it ends up flipping it the other direction. Now, how far in should you go? As long as you make the cut all the way in, it kind of produces the effect that you want. That's as far as you need to go. So for me, about halfway back into the model is 5.6, 5.5. Again, you can select and put a number in here, or you can click and drag on these handy arrows and extrude cut it kind of freeform or freehand. So that's halfway into the model now. I like the desired or the outcome of that. So I'm going to hit the green check mark to finish. Now I have an amazing looking face on the front of my jack-o'-lantern. And again, you can see that the shell feature is showing on the inside now. That we've removed all that material. So two more things. Last thing, or second to last thing, is I want to make a hole on the bottom. And that's where my tea light can be inserted, so I can have some kind of glow effect once I get this printed out. And so I'm going to select the bottom surface, this flattened portion of my sketch. Then I'm just going to click on the bottom of the view cube. So again, I can see this nicely squared up. And the dimension that worked out well for me was a diameter of 4.5. So I suggest you use that same number. So I drew the sketch. Now I'm just going to grab my dimension tool, add that to that particular line, and then type in 4.5. Maybe. Let me see, double check. Oh, there it goes. It was just lagging a bit. And then finish that sketch. And the same thing as we just did is extrude, remove. So extrude, remove, and it doesn't have to go up very far. It's only really cutting 0.1 of an inch into the model. But again, if you wanted to switch to like a 3D view, you can kind of grab that arrow, drag that up and down as far as you want it to go. Really, we're just cutting through that bottom plate. So I'm going to leave it about there, hit the check mark. And so now I'm pretty much done making my model. The last two things I can add are just for fun in terms of the graphics that I'm seeing here on the screen. We can add some colors to our model. And just so you guys are aware, those colors are not going to translate into the 3D printer. In fact, the only material I have with me at home with my printer now is white. So if I end up making the model for you, your pumpkin will be white, although you can paint them. There's ways to paint your models. But what I want to start off with is in the left-hand menu here, where it says part one, if I click on part one, the entire model gets selected, right? And so if I right-click on part one, you can go and say edit appearance. And what it brings up is this nice color palette. And so I'm going to go for orange, obviously. Almost pumpkins are orange. Some are white, I suppose. But I'm going to go for orange on this one. And then let's say I want a particular part of my model to be a different color, like to have some contrast. I can then select that one feature, right-click, and for some reason, edit appearance is now on the bottom. If you say part one, it's going to do the whole model again. So I'm going to say add appearance to this particular face. And because that's a stem, I'd like to give it a nice brown color on top. And you can edit and make your own custom colors, all this type of stuff. Really fun here to play around with the color palette. But that sounds good to me. I'm going to hit the check mark, and I'm basically done. And I have a nice jack-o'-lantern to then hopefully get 3D printed. So hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial and you had some fun making your own jack-o'-lanterns. And that's pretty much it for me for today. So again, have some fun, get into the Halloween spirit, and also getting to play around with Onshape a little bit more. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Thanks for joining me. Have a good day.